Okay, so this is a review I was going to make for an underappreciated action JRPG game I just enjoyed beating. However, after looking up other reviews for this game, it quickly became apparent to me that I actually need to make my own review for responding to what others have said about this game equally as for reviewing the game itself, that I'm considering to be a hidden gem for this genre of gaming. The gist of it is because basically most of what I've heard said about this game was wrong, as in simply untrue. I've heard reviewers both praise and condemn every aspect of this game, and so many are still just wrong. So being the hardcore gamer that I am, who only plays games that are good, which means I hate most RPGs in general, I hope to be able to clearly illustrate to you, the viewer, why this game is good and that you should buy it, and why everyone else is wrong. Short answer is because they're bad at the game. So the brief notable mentions of the background for Shining Resonance refrain. It's part of the Shining franchise, though it's the only proper action JRPG in it. The original release was back in the days long past of 2014 for the PS3 in Japan only, and the cel-shaded art style still looks great to this day, and has since been ported to many consoles, and the Switch version is the one I played, which I got on sale for $20. The ports all come with English dubs, which my weeboo sister who hates English dubs says are the best she's ever heard.
Will you help us? With the Shining Dragon's power, Alfheim could be free of Imperial influence.
And all the DLC for the game, which includes post-game content, plus a bonus game mode where you can start with an extra 2 characters who are the villains of the main story as party members. So for these reasons, the Refrain Edition is the version of the game you want to get. Now, I said I hate most RPGs, but I also consider Shining Resonance a hidden gem. How could this be? Well, this is because of the real-time combat system. The sheer amount of depth of detail and customization that has been poured into this game's fighting mechanics is the best part about Shining Resonance, and would easily make for a solid great game if it was just a game where you fought enemies and bosses. But this is a JRPG, so it comes with a whole complete game on top of it as well to give the player a contextual reason to be invested in the fighting. See, this JRPG fantasy setting was utilized by the devs to go all out with what kinds of things you can do in battle, short of having a stealth mode where you can just backstab everything before doing any fighting. That even by the end of 50 hours it took both me and my sister to finish our separate playthroughs of this game, we were still discovering new features that were available to us the whole time, we just had not yet experimented enough to find them all. If you can think about making some kind of play, it's probably doable in this game that sees you, the player, controlling a character of your choice as the leader of your party, of which you can have 4 active members that you can swap control of at any time, with the others being controlled on their own by the AI, and yes, each character has their own unique and satisfying playstyle if you can believe it. Now I'd like to go over the various complaints I've seen people who have reviewed the game have made that I can remember in no particular order. Let's start with the difficulty. First, there are people who say the game is easy. This is simply not true. Though one person also mentioned that they spent 70% of their playtime grinding, so that would explain why they would think a game based off stats with levels is easy. Then, of course, we have the opposite end of people who say the game is too hard. The game itself offers a normal and casual difficulty setting that can be changed at any time in the options. So right away, to anyone who has said the game is too difficult, 1, they can play easy mode at any time, and 2, they're wrong. And to illustrate how wrong they are, both me and my sister on our first blind playthrough managed to get through the game beating the bosses who were always at least 40% a higher level than our party was. I don't even know of any other game in existence that has levels where such a deficit is surmountable in normal gameplay. The difficulty of this game is almost completely based on the player's skill level. So, you know, get good and all that. Next, how about the story? It's the classic hero's adventure told as a grand fantasy epic. The metaphorical tale of the tension we as living beings face with existing in a reality. Exactly what you'd expect from a JRPG, which apparently some reviewers think consists of boring, uneventful tropes. Okay then, not sure what they actually want from a story then. The actual problem this game has with its story is its presentation and writing. Its ambitions were far greater than its capacities, and results in telling the player everything with lots of unvoiced text instead of showing it due to a lack of production value. Which I bet if the game had a full anime production to go along with it, this would be regarded as the best JRPG ever made because people are simple like that.
All I need to open the path to Deus is the power of the Shining Dragon. And Galahorn will help me take it.
Why are you trying to resurrect Deus? You'll unleash the catastrophe!
We do not fear the catastrophe like you do. We welcome it with open arms. Only the weak will be purged. But we are armed with the blessings of Deus. We shall survive and inherit the new world.
But it's not all bad, because the terrible Fire Emblem-like cutscenes traverse into the they're so bad they're good territory, and make for some unintentional and unsuspecting comedic moments which made me burst out laughing the hardest I've had in a long time. Like when you encounter the big bad guy in the story for the first time and your characters fight him in the cutscene, which consists of the screen abruptly fading to black, which happens a lot, and a slash of color flashes across the screen with a clang sound effect, and it fades back to your character saying, "Ugh!" with nothing in the scene having changed. Or when a character apparently has the power to mind control people by flashing a blue light. This game could have had something really special going for it if it had just been self-aware enough to how laughably terrible the Fire Emblem cutscenes were. And I often found myself suspecting the devs actually were self-aware of this and intended it to be this way, but just pretended to play a straight face with it all the way. Guess we'd have to ask the devs to find out then, kek. The main protagonist, Yuma, is a legitimate bad character, though, who never says anything interesting for the entire game to remain as inoffensive as possible to everyone and ends up being liked by no one. I remember halfway through, I was talking to an NPC, and I just said to myself, man, Yuma sure is a main character of an anime JRPG. But then while writing this review, I got the idea if someone would want to edit all the cutscenes from this game and just remove all of Yuma's dialogue and make him a silent protagonist, wondering how much better of a character that would make him. You can even give him some Link grunt sound effects to use to respond with when talking to NPCs, lol. No innovation. This I simply do not understand. Is real-time combat in a genre of gaming plagued by the scourge of boring known as turn-based combat not innovative enough for people? Or are they just not already aware that everything is a remake of something that came before it and there is nothing new under the sun? Then there are many people complaining about the bad AI. The AI does indeed not play the characters as competently as a human player does, this is true. It's kind of what makes the player character the leader of the party that the rest are supposed to follow and support, which they do well enough to make the gameplay functional. And if we're being honest here, none of you who have played the game have been perfect when controlling your character in combat either. Most negative reviews on Steam, for example, did not play the game for very long, so they lacked a crucial gameplay element of leveling up the character's bond mechanic, which improves the functionality of the AI. Kind of like your party members who are mostly strangers over time learning to trust and care and rely on their partners in support and battle. Almost like you're playing a game where you take on the role of characters gaining experience with one another. I wonder if we could have a name to make a genre for this type of game idea. I even found one guy single out Sonya, saying she had bad spell power progression, claiming her starting abilities are the strongest and the rest she unlocks are useless, which therefore makes leveling her unrewarding. So, I sit there and wonder to myself, did he ever get Sonya to the level where she gains the ability to perfectly shield all attacks and take 0 damage from anything? Because that's pretty freaking good ability that makes leveling her pretty rewarding if you ask me. Also, pro tip, if you're having party stability problems from your AI allies, then just put Sonya in with the perfect shield ability, and when I played with her, she used it all the time to try and absorb the damage from the otherwise devastating boss attacks, which was a major help in keeping your healers safe and the party formation from faltering in the heat of battle. Plus, a side note, what's going on with Sonya's armor? Is she wearing a metal skirt? Me and my sister looked at her model, and she's convinced she's wearing metal panties, so who can say? I've heard plenty of complaints that the world map is too large, so it needs a fast travel that it doesn't have, even though some of them admit it does have a fast travel you can use to get back to the home base, while others say it's too small, which makes exploring boring. This is only partially accurate. The world map is sufficiently large, with 13 different locations the adventure takes the player through. What it lacks is interactables with the environment to make it engaging to travel. This isn't post-2015 AAA game development time where everything had to have an endless and endlessly boring open world for the player to waste their precious life traversing to get to the interesting part of the game. This is pre-2015 AAA JRPG. That means you have a defined area of travel with items to the sides, and everything that is not flat, even if it's just half a tree root sticking out of the ground, is an insurmountable invisible wall that not even the most powerful of the world dragons can lay a scratch on, let alone overcome, lol. Now, this wouldn't actually be a problem if the areas had some interesting level design to them, connecting them to other areas, but sadly they don't. The travel is purely a tree-branching set of pathways, which itself would still be okay if the areas were large so you could still feel like you're exploring a world. But instead, the devs decided, for whatever reason, that each area of the game had to be broken up into sub-areas with loading screens, making each location smaller than a Super Mario 64 course. Which is a crying damn shame, because this game actually has one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. Fitting for a game whose unique theme is musical harmony, where the main characters fight with mythical instruments as their weapons, wouldn't you agree? And while sometimes the branching pathways are guarded by a mini-boss that if you beat, you can travel further in the map for getting useful items before the plot would have you go to that location, the trade-off of having an unengaging world is simply not worth it, sadly. Fortunately though, walking around an overworld is not the primary draw for playing a JRPG, and there are plenty of other JRPGs that have even less freedom of movement for the player that still sold way more copies than this game. Final Hallway 13 come to mind, anyone? Then I've heard plenty of smaller, stupid, incorrect / self-contradictory things said about the games like, not enough save points, even though there's a save point in every area and they take less than 2 minutes to get to. You can't animation cancel. You can. You can't spellcasting cancel. You can. Being invulnerable to new enemy encounters for a few seconds after battle somehow resulted in a player getting more disadvantageous encounters instead of less. Only the active party members gain EXP. Actually, there is an EXP share item you can get, though I never found it myself yet. Combat is slow-paced and over too quickly. Yes, someone actually said that. Grinding for levels is too easy but takes up most of the game time. Yes, someone actually said that too. The boss fights are either way too easy or way too hard. So I hope now you can see that the only conclusion I can draw from having listened to other people review this game is that they don't know what they're talking about, they're all bad at the game, they've never been good at the game, they never even played StarCraft, I can tell based on what they're saying. And I think I understand the reason for this conundrum as well. Basically, really, if you stop to think about it in the broad sense for a few seconds, what is the primary element of a game that comes to mind when people think of JRPGs and why they would be drawn to it? A compelling narrative-based story game where between the story segments has the player drudge through a turn-based combat system to gain experience levels to acquire high enough stats to surmount the boss obstacle. That's the role-playing part. In order to progress to the next story segment to repeat this process till the story is concluded. When we as gamers refer to the grind that is involved in gaining the XP by beating lots of weaker enemies first, what is the player actually doing during this time? They are using their superior stats to force their way past a weaker obstacle till they can gain sufficient stats to do so for the stronger one. If we were to take all those weaker obstacles being fought and put them all in front of the player in a line in a real-time combat system to have the player repeatedly hit their attack button / cast their most effective spell to get past this part of the game, do you know what we would call that? We would call that a mindless hack and slash game. Another terrible genre of gaming. And if you, the player, are going to go into Shining Resonance Refrain with the same mindset that has become customary to the JRPG system, thinking you can play this as if it's a stat-based hack and slash, then you will be missing out on the wild breadth of its abilities and will quickly stop having fun as the enemies outlevel you the further the game progresses and you are no longer able to outstat your way to victory. For just a brief overview of the options available to the player itself already seems overwhelming. Because remember, this is all happening in real time, which means being observant to the flow of not just your health bar, but the entire battlefield is essential to making the difference between a fight you cannot win and a fight you can win. Just some of the combat mechanics offered by Shining include a light and heavy attack, comboing, tons of spellcasting, items, dodging, blocking, parrying, bonus damage when breaking an enemy's guard, bonus damage when hitting an enemy's back, bonus damage when hitting an enemy's weakness for bonus damage, auto-targeting, manual targeting, mana that replenishes when you land normal attacks, attacking that stops working when your character runs out of stamina, stamina that replenishes when you aren't attacking, issuing strategical commands to both the entire party and to each individual party member, which actually works for the most part, interrupting enemy attacks, getting your attacks interrupted, knocking down enemies, being knocked down by enemies, equipables that change your character's stats, crafting equipables for your equipables that change your character's stats and how they play, like being able to prevent yourself from being knocked down, and... Oh, sorry, I still went on a bit long there, didn't I? But there's still so much more depth to this game. Oh well, I guess you'll just have to play it for yourself to find out everything now, won't you? Now tell me, dear viewer, does what I've described to you just now not sound very similar to the gameplay mechanics of another one of the most well-known and highly regarded games ever made? I'll give you some time to think about it because I think you will be shocked and possibly outraged when I tell you what I realized this game's combat is surprisingly identical to, which is what made it world-renowned while Shining Resonance Refrain still remains in obscurity. I can give you some hints though. The mystery famous game is also an action RPG-like game that saw its first released on the PS3 and has since been ported to every game console in existence, and I think my oven as well. Phew, this script is getting pretty big now. I know, I should finish off with discussing the balance, specifically one part in Chapter 7 that appears to be universally despised by everyone who has liked playing the game far enough to reach. This included my sister as well, until I was able to show her the light by doing my hardcore gamer thing where I experimented until I had revealed to myself what the designed intent of this event of the game really was about, which made me both joyful and sorrowful because it then became my favorite part of the whole game. However, this is the only time where something like this happened. When near the end of the adventure, the story forces a temporary split in your party where the player is forced to fight some enemies with only 2 specific party members. So if the player didn't level these characters along with the rest of the party, it would pose a difficult challenge to overcome. Which it also did for me initially until I figured out how to do it well and could then see the context for figuring this out was already all in place. It simply took me breaking out of the "this is how you play a JRPG" mindset that was still influencing how I was playing the game. See, at this point in the story, your party is assaulting the enemy stronghold, the most well-guarded location in the game, and the super cool party member Agnum comes up with the idea of creating a distraction by drawing the attention of the entrance guards away so the rest of the team can enter the stronghold. Then the other super cool party member, everyone in this game is super cool, okay? Lestin, who joined your team in the previous chapter, decides that's too dangerous for Agnum to do on his own and accompanies him from making the distraction. Then you enter the battle and immediately notice a few oddities.
Alright, Imperials, come get it! You're about to fight Agnum, the blazing pyro maestro and his lovely assistant.
I beg your pardon. If anything, you're my assistant. And I certainly wouldn't call you lovely.
First, typically when you enter a normal battle, the enemies start off in melee striking distance, wasting no time getting into the action, which is contained in a small circle from the encounter point, which you can run at the edge of for a few seconds to leave the battle. When this fight starts, however, the enemy soldiers spawn so far away you can barely see them, and the entire sub-area is now the battlefield, free to roam in, and free from the other random enemies that are normally present. And the battle music is different too. In fact, this is the only time this song plays in the game, which is another tally to add to the shame list because it's one of the best songs in the game. Its mood is very different from the previous battle songs. This sounds like when someone decides to put all their strength they have into a heroic effort of overcoming insurmountable odds that they know they may not survive. It's got a very triumphant self-sacrifice emotion to it, I feel. Almost enough to make me cry. So with the mood being set, we can engage the enemy, or rather, we can disengage the enemy, because there are several waves of set unit spawns that are all overwhelming for Lestin and Agnum to take in an upfront fight, even if you were close in levels to them. Which means the intended way to play this brilliant part of the game is by how Agnum said to do it, making yourself a distraction by running away from the enemy battalion, luring them away from the entrance, disrupting their formation, and finding opportunities to take advantageous fights for your team. To use your superior speed and the landscape to your benefit instead of what everyone else did by mindlessly trying to stat, hack, and slash force their way past the enemy guards. Which is also fitting from a general gameplay design perspective because when one is nearing the end of a game, it should be testing the player to see if they have some mastery of all the different gameplay elements that they have been taught how to use up to this point, to be able to overcome the test before throwing the ultimate challenge at the player for the finisher of the game, whether that be the final area or boss or puzzle or whatever. But because everyone has failed to understand the mastery they needed to overcome this test, I saw so many people say this is where they stopped playing the game, which is another shame to add to the tally. Once I realized this was the way to fight this battle, it became the most fun I've had with the battle system and wish there were more events like this in the game that tried to come up with different scenarios to put the player in. Oh well, we'll just have to hope for an eventual sequel that can be more free with its gameplay scenario experimentation, eh? At least the gameplay of the standard enemy and boss fights are still fun enough to carry Shining Resonance to a must-play. Also, the Horde enemy quests you can sometimes find are another fun way you can modify the default combat scenarios, so that offers some value to checking the NPCs for quests. Also, I plan on completing the Agnum and Lestin fight without leveling them at all to demonstrate what I'm saying to you all. Okay, I think that's enough for me to close out this review now. Were any of you able to figure out what the similar mystery game was yet? Because I'm going to tell you now. The reason I'm praising the combat of this game so much are the same reasons that everyone else praises this other game, because it's such a deep and rewarding system to engage with. Shining Resonance Refrain is the Dark Souls of JRPGs! Oh yeah, there's also one more thing I should mention, since it was the main selling point for me and my sister, along with the real-time combat system. Actually, if you want, you can totally play this game as a mindless hack-and-slash spectacle fest of awesome, because this game has something Dark Souls will never have. And that is, you can transform into a fucking dragon at any time and breathe fire on anyone foolish enough to oppose you.
That piece of shit!
I'm gonna stomp on you. You can be a fucking dragon in this game the whole time? Why didn't anyone tell me? This is too easy. Bye-bye. So what are you waiting for? This game is on sale for $13 on Steam. Summer sale right now. Go buy it. What hurry? What are you doing? Ah!